My name is Hannah, and this is my beauty budget. Hey guys, so I am filming this video just for fun. I received this palette, the Alter Ego Daydream palette, in PR a couple of weeks ago, and I've fallen really hard for it. I just love it. I love the textures most of all, but the colors are colors that I've really been craving lately, these kind of warm reddish berries with a mauve overtone, and I've been getting a lot of amazing looks out of this palette, and I've just been wanting to dig into it more. So very shortly after I received it, I conceived of this video, which is just, you know, a video where I do overhead shooting, which is something I've been wanting to explore more of, and kind of explore this palette in a creative way, an artistic way, doing some swatches, but also playing around with color combinations and just giving you guys a really good close-up view of this palette and the way that it performs, not necessarily on the eyes, although I do hope to do some demonstrations with this palette, but just as an artistic tool. I did want to mention that I am an Alter Ego affiliate. I have an affiliated discount code with them. But I want you guys to know that I conceived of this video before I agreed to be affiliated with them. It was really shortly after I opened this that I conceived of this video, and I got really excited about playing with this on overhead camera and just swatching it and messing around with it, especially after I learned that the pans are magnetic and removable, because I think that that will make for some really fun footage. And it was actually my desire to make this video that spurred me to want to be an Alter Ego affiliate, because I realized that I was starting to have a desire to make these kind of more targeted product-specific videos, kind of like artistic makeup spotlight single product review videos. And I thought, you know, if I'm going to be making that video just for my own sake, just for fun, I might as well have an affiliate code to offer. I might as well be able to offer a discount, and I might as well be affiliated. So that was the order in which that happened. I'm not making this video so that I can make money through my code. I decided to accept a code just so that in the event that people purchase the palette because of this video, I am associated with the brand and I can potentially make a small commission. That's it for the intro. Let's go ahead and get into the meat of the video. So I'm going to go ahead and start by swatching all of the colors. I'm not really a master swatcher. That's not something I've perfected on my channel, but there's a first time for everything. I'm just going to be playing around with this and hoping that I can get some good shots. So I'm going to swatch them actually by type, and I'll start with this unusual one, which is the concealer base. I've actually found this to be more useful than I expected because I use it for sticking down these glitters. I guess that you would say that it's useful for cutting the crease. I think that that's what most people would use it for. I find this formula to be relatively thin and lightweight. It's definitely not a full coverage product. It's almost like just a little bit of a sticky cream that's in a pan in this palette that makes it easier to work with the more textured products. I don't know if you can see that because I have pretty light skin and it's a pretty lightly colored product, but it's also a bit sheer. It's sheer on me. I don't think that you could use it for cutting the crease in that you would use it to obliterate the color underneath. I think it just works as a kind of creamy adhesive. So now I'm going to move on to swatching all of the mattes. So Glow, sort of a really bright, brightening pink. Bubbly, a peach. Sunset, really lovely berry toned mauve. Fawn, a slightly browner mauve. And Sunkissed, which has a bit more purple in it. I don't know how well you'll be able to see that these shadows have a pretty good variation in tone, even though they're in the same color family. And that's something that I quite like about this. I like being able to choose a slightly more purple version or a slightly redder version or a slightly browner version of the same kind of colored eyeshadow. And then the other 5 mattes are Dusk, which is one of my favorite shadows in this palette. It's got almost like a grayish tone. You know what this is? It's like the eyeshadow version of Maybelline Gone Grayish. It's like a grauve, a grayish mauve. Celestial, which is a lovely sort of pale violet. Enchanted. Sugar Plum. And Daybreak. So these ones are kind of the deeper, richer colors. So rich and lovely. And I appreciate that Daybreak is actually a bit darker. I mean, when you look at this palette, I think if I had looked at this palette and not necessarily used it, I might have leveled the criticism that I often level at palettes, which is that there's not enough depth, like not enough depth of tone. But Sugar Plum and Daybreak actually are pretty dark. They can be built up to be pretty dark. And I've managed to get quite smoky berry toned eyes or smoky mauvey eyes with this palette, smoking it out just with the colors that are here, the deepening colors. And you can see how deep they run in the swatches. So those are all of the mattes. I'm gonna go ahead and swatch the extraordinary shimmers and glitters on my other arm. So there are 4 eyeshadows in this palette that have this kind of white, flecky, really shimmery. In fact, the flecks that are mixed in, especially in Fairy Tale and Star-Crossed, they actually look not white, but holographic, like iridescent. Maybe not holographic, but iridescent. And these stunning eyeshadows are really what make this palette extraordinary to me. Star-Crossed has been the one that I've ended up using the most because I've been using it as a highlighter, a cheek highlighter. And when those little crumbs of mixed in iridescent chunks get buffed out on the cheek with a buffing brush, really kind of creamed into the cheek, they make the most extraordinary shine. I've really been loving using Star-Crossed, both as a brow bone highlight and an all over lid shade and as a highlight. I think Fairy Tale might be my favorite eyeshadow in this palette. It's a lavender with a really hefty dose of that iridescent color shifting just ingredient. You can see there's a really huge chunk of it right there, and it's just awesome. I love that kind of mixed textured thing. And this is gorgeous on the lid. It's gorgeous for kind of brightening up the lid, brightening up the inner corner. And then Dreamer and Cloud 9 are both really beautiful and just a little bit more standard. It's like a standard really shiny cranberry and a standard slightly warm kind of copper with a little bit of purple mixed in, because it's almost like they didn't completely mix the shadows. They left them unmixed. They left them kind of mysterious and chunky, like a swirl. Now there is one sort of regular metallic in the palette. It's this one, Twilight. It's just a really lovely purpley kind of cranberry metallic. And it's also darker. It's darker than the other metallics, and I really like using a dark metallic to deepen up my outer corner. I frequently do all shimmer eye looks, and I found myself using Twilight a lot for that purpose. And it's quite purpley red. It's really quite rich in color. So when I use it to define a look, it really turns that look into one that is very red and purpley looking, and I like that a lot too. It's almost like it's got a tiny bit of orange running through it too, a tiny bit of a gold shift. And then these two, Cosmos and Starlight, are the pressed glitters, and they're very different from for example, the ColourPop pressed glitters, which are really big chunks. These are very fine glitters, really tiny chunks of glitter, and there's a creamy, sticky base mixed in with them. So when you press your finger into them, you really feel something sliding around in there. You feel like a kind of glue getting onto your finger along with the glitter. And I find that they adhere really impressively well. That's another thing that's shocked me about this palette, is that I can pat these onto my eyes. I've never used a glitter glue with these two glitters. I can pat them onto my eyes just with the adhesive that's in the palette, and they'll stay. And there isn't that much fallout, and the fallout that does appear on my cheeks while I'm applying them. It's pretty easy to clean up. One thing that I don't really understand is why they're so close in color. I mean, I guess this one's a little bit pinker and this one's a little bit more of a red, but I just feel like there are other color possibilities in here that they could have gone with for the glitters, or perhaps that whoever originated this color scheme could have gone with. I know that this is pretty much a dupe palette, but someone also recently commented that the Huda Beauty New Nudes palette was a dupe of a palette from a smaller company before, that it was kind of already a stolen idea that was then made more popular by that more popular brand, and now this is the smaller brand that's taking that same idea. I think that the way that things get stolen and reframed and rewritten over and over again in art and in commerce is one of the reasons that dupe products don't bother me that much, because I find that it's actually frequently difficult to know from where an idea originated. And when it comes to color, it's not something that you can own. It's not something that you can invent. So the rearrangement of colors, the decision to produce formulas with certain colors, that's generally something that's free, and those ideas are generally things that are shared. So that's a little preview of my upcoming video about imitation and dupes in the fashion and beauty world. I'm still compiling the notes for that video, but it's on its way to you. In any case, in this palette, which is the one I have, so it's the reference point that I have, I wish that these weren't so close in color. I wish that there were one that was kind of more purple, like some of these purples. This palette has purple as one of its tones, and this is definitely like a reddish pink and a slightly lighter reddish pink. I think it would be great if there were a glitter in here that just gave the glitter part of this palette a little bit more of a spectrum, a little more dimension. But they're both gorgeous, and I definitely use them for different things. This one's gonna keep an eye look more ethereal, more fairy-like, and this one's gonna ground an eye look and make it a little bit more dramatic. All right, the swatches are out of the way, and now it's time to play. And this is actually the part of this video that I'm the most excited about. This is the vision that I really, really had, because these eyeshadows, to my absolute delight, are removable. And they don't pop out super easily because there's no holes in the back. You have to have something really thin. I have this skinny little sort of oil spill rainbow depotting tool that I purchased on Amazon. I'll link this below. And it makes it really, really, really easy. You just need something super thin to get in between the side of the palette and the side of the pan. But then they pop out and they are magnetic. So I am just going to play with popping these shadows out of this palette. I'm probably going to be speeding up the footage, rearranging them, having fun, and then I'm going to create a little mini magnetic travel palette using some of these, which is something that I've been doing all the time. I just want to play with color, play with this palette, and just show its versatility. So there are all of the eyeshadows as singles, and I think that that's really fun. I think if I were still trying to build my single shadow collection, which is something I was just starting to do at the end of my last year before I started my no-buy year, what I did then was I purchased a handful of ColourPop palettes and I depotted them and I mixed them in with my singles. I think that's something that you could definitely do with this. I personally really like this packaging. I really, really like this sort of soft touch, slightly reflective cover. I feel like it's very quality. I really like the mirror. So I'm gonna keep these shadows in their packaging. But if I were trying to make my collection of single shadows more robust and I needed colors in this color category, I would definitely consider getting this and just depotting it and popping them into one of my magnetic palettes. Speaking of my magnetic palettes, this is a little magnetic palette by the brand Nabla. One of you sent this to me and I've been really enjoying using it because of its sweet little size. It's just a really great size for creating a little palette that I can take with me that has enough eyeshadows in it, or in some cases, you know, enough eyeshadows and maybe a blush to do a whole look. And it's perfect for creating a travel palette, creating a palette to take with me to work if I'm doing a photo shoot and I need to have some of the eyeshadows that I used on hand. So right now I am going to demonstrate making a little palette. And I'm going to start by adding one of my favorite blushes, which is Apricot in the Middle. This is a Wet n Wild blush. I depotted this from its Wet n Wild packaging and I stuck magnets on the back. So I use it as a free-floating addition to certain magnetic palettes. So this is a little magnetic palette that I might make to take with me if I wanted to make an ethereal, sort of unicorny, fairy-toned eye. But I thought that there was a chance that I might want to deepen up the outer corner a little bit and provide myself a little bit more sculpting. So I took Dusk, which is this kind of grayish color. I really love that for a more purpley, soft, sculpted crease and above the crease. And then I took this one right here from the upper corner, which is Sunkissed. It's kind of the most toned down, most neutral of the lighter mattes. And it's one that I might use to buff Dusk out into my brows if I needed to. Then I took this one, Fairy Tale, which is this gorgeous, metallic, shiny, iridescent, purpley lavender color. That I have found is gorgeous all over the lid if I want that kind of iridescent unicorn look. It's really flattering to the eye. And when I have used this as the main color, the main shadow in an eye look, I've always paired it with this glitter, this kind of lighter, more pinky toned glitter, Starlight. I'll just have a tiny bit of Starlight right in the middle of the lid. Now, I almost never go anywhere without Star-Crossed. It's, again, one of my favorite shadows in here. I would grab this one to tap on the brow bone for this more ethereal look, and maybe to even tap on my cheeks on top of Apricot in the middle to create a little bit of highlight, and for an inner corner highlight. It's just an amazing all-purpose highlighting shadow for me. And then I decided on Sugar Plum as the one darker, the one matte, adding more dimension in this little palette, just in case. I think I could make a really amazing eye look, or several really amazing eye looks without it, just with those lighter colors. But I always like to have one to hold down the fort if I want to make the look more dramatic and give it a little bit more contrast. So that was a little palette that I feel like was leaning on the purples in this palette, the kind of purple lavender bent that it has. So what if I wanted to lean into kind of like the dusky reds, the deep, rich kind of berry, that sort of almost like sickly editorial flushed eye look that I enjoy so much? What might I do in that case? Let's see. All right, that is a little travel palette for an amazing kind of rich red smoky eye. And I find that this shadow, the first one that I picked, Sunset right here, it's actually quite blushy, and it gives me that gorgeous blushy effect on my eyes when I use it to basically set my eye primer to lay down the basis of the look. I often go in with Sunset and then follow with this one right here, which I believe is Enchanted, the kind of more pinky matte right there, and then start building these darker cranberries onto the lid. I often do that. I really love this reddish glitter and this more ruddy, shiny one, Dreamer. And then I ended up throwing Star-Crossed again into this little palette because I feel like it's good to have one really bright metallic lighter highlighting color to kind of help sculpt when you have so many dark shadows in a look. But you can see by grouping these all together that there's a dark side to this palette, even though it looks so light and dreamy when you look at the shadows all together in that light dreamy packaging. So what if I wanted to bring in some other colors? What if I wanted to make a little palette using some of the shadows from the Daydream palette, kind of building a background or a general color idea, and then adding some pops of color of my own? I have one of my magnetic palettes here. This is the Adept palette, and I recently played around with some of my singles, creating this little kind of green world over here, and this little kind of red mauve world over here. And I am going to select from this some shadows that I think, a shadow that I think might work. I think I'm gonna have to zoom out. So one possibility that springs immediately to mind is to put one of my big, beautiful, super intense iridescent eyeshadows into this little palette. And this one is calling to me. This is actually new to me. I just purchased it recently with my budget. It's JD Glow's 365, and that fits perfectly there. And it totally changes this palette into basically a sunset palette. With this eyeshadow, because it's kind of greeny gold, it's two undertones that don't exist in the Daydream palette, you add a tremendous amount of dimension just adding that one eyeshadow there. What a fun little palette that would be. And I also find that this eyeshadow looks really amazing layered over top of reds. So if I built part of my eye look with these kind of reddish pinks blended into each other, and then I went in with this one and tapped it. I don't know if you guys can see that, but they make sort of a grungy, glimmery, sunsetty situation. What if instead of gold, though, I were to go for the famous pop of blue? So I didn't know what these blue-green eyeshadows were before I pulled them out of my magnetic palette, but this one right here is a colored rain shadow called Forbidden. Look at that. And I actually recently posted an eye look featuring this eyeshadow on my Instagram page, and a lot of you asked questions about it. So that's Colored Rain Forbidden. And this right here is a Luxie Beauty shadow called Rage. And it's a little bit different. Forbidden's a little bit more of like a blue peacock, and Rage is a little bit dirtier. It's like a dirty blackened, like bluish teal. So if we didn't have the gold, but we had those, then the possibility of kind of mixing purple into teal and getting that grungy blackened edge to the look becomes pretty appealing, pretty amazing. I feel like this is a pretty amazing, that's a pretty amazing little palette right there. Okay, so what if instead of playing in Green World, which has the contrasting color story to the Daydream palette, what if instead of playing in Green World, we were to play in Mauve World, kind of reddish mauve world, which does have the same general idea, but there are shadows in my little mauve world that would change the feel of this little palette built from the Daydream palette. And the first ones that jump out to me are these more orange toned red mattes, because the Daydream palette leans towards purple toned red mattes. So by adding that almost coral orange toned red matte and this slightly more cherry red matte, I've completely changed the tone of this little palette and the possibilities, even though they all really, really work well together. And I think that both of these are Morphe shadows that have been depotted. Oh no, this one is Luxie Beauty Maple. That's what that is. Wow, that's a beautiful, beautiful eyeshadow. And they look more different swatched than they do in the pan. So maple is definitely kind of like a reddish brown. And then this, which I think might be from the Jaclyn Hill Morphe palette, that's more of an orange. Oh yeah, they're very different. They're very different. So this bright orangey kind of soft coral would really change the look with the Daydream palette if it were the background of the look, right? And then this more ruddy deepening one, I'll swatch it up here next to the ruddy deepening shade in the Daydream palette, which is Daybreak. You can see that it's got more red in it rather than kind of like a purpley brown. So that would also change kind of the outer edges of a look. So that kind of color story, that kind of really orangey red with a bright, gosh, I feel like it looks like kind of an abstract painting of a beating heart or something. That sort of orangey blood red that doesn't appear in the Daydream palette but works so well with it. It would be easy to get a sort of wonderful, dimensional, rich, bloody red look like this just by adding one or two little singles to my Daydream travel palette. I really, really love that. That's the kind of look I've been super into lately. So that's it, you guys. Those are all of the little eyeshadows back in their homes. I feel like I need to point out that you don't need this palette in order to play with color in this way. This video is more just about playing with color and about learning to look at a palette, a pre-made palette, or a palette of singles and see the possibility. See the way that we can combine colors in different ways, see the ways that we can kind of break out of the box of what a palette implies by adding just another single here or there. I do very much appreciate the fact that these are removable and magnetic because that makes it easier to do that. It makes it easier to play and it makes it easier to make the palette your own. But it's not necessarily about the Daydream palette. It's really about color and about creativity, ownership of color, and being willing to play in makeup and let that be one of the sources of our joys, whether it's something we're spending money on right now or not, and whether it's new to us or not. This palette is new to me, but a lot of my singles aren't, and I know that I'm able to have this kind of fun and make new combinations of colors even when it's been months and months since I've gotten any new eyeshadows. I know that because that was what I did during my no-buy year. This is a kind of makeup playtime in which I frequently indulge, and I'm hoping that by making this video, it will inspire you guys to indulge in this kind of playtime as well. That is it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope that you are remembering to take extra good care of yourself right now so that you can be the most effective version of yourself as you do your work in the world.